speaker of today is Keith. You're a founder of pRxEngage, and I have been looking so much forward to this because I think that clinical trial today is something that is very important. And I think I will leave the microphone to you and switch myself off.
Okay, well, thank you, Lisbeth, for giving me a platform to speak. And what I wanted to ensure is that it wasn't just necessarily me speaking. So I asked Caleigh to join me today. And Caleigh's founder of Fight to Breathe, and a person living with a rare disorder herself. But I'll let her introduce herself down there. I think, you know, really the message that I'd like to get across today is we've conducted clinical trials for hundreds of years. If you look back to the very earliest ones, the scurvy trials with James Lind, this was in the 1600s. We've come on quite a distance since then. But in reality, if we look at, say, the last 15, 20 years, I don't think we've particularly moved things along as far as we should have done. Saying that, we are at a point in time where I think there is a significant change coming, and I can feel it across the various, for want of a better phrase, stakeholders that we work with, whether that be biopharma, patients themselves, the communities that patients engage with, and the research sites. The system has been challenged to this point. We still have way too many trials that are delayed as a result of poor enrollment and poor engagement. We have studies designed in such a manner that they are not typically available to a wide population that they are actually, that the therapy is designed for. But that is starting to change, and I think a lot of that change comes from the way in which community is partnering with biopharma, the research site world, and really patient voice becoming much stronger. We're in an era of social media, and Caleigh is one of those people with a very powerful voice. So community doesn't necessarily just mean a charity or a patient advisory group. It can be one person leading the charge for others. And that's typically how a lot of these community groups start out, in particular in the rare disease world. So if we can go to the next slide, I explain who we are and why I'm here. So I'm Keith Berelowitz. I am a bench scientist by training. I did a series of degrees before I was forced to go and work. And over the last 20 years, though, I've worked in commercial clinical research. I was fortunate to work with some amazing people at Richmond Pharmacology, based in London, the CRO based in London. And there I had the opportunity to lead the patient recruitment, patient engagement team, as well as become director of operations, and work closely with a number of biopharma partners. Over that time, I thought we had solved patient engagement. Our studies ran particularly well. The majority of them to time, very few were ever delayed. And then COVID hit, and we started working on a more global field, and that exposed us to what's going on in other countries, in other sites. So whilst we thought we were enrolling well, we didn't necessarily see this with other groups. And even then, I thought we're doing a fantastic job. It's not that hard. It must be the people. Then I had an acute dalliance with a suspected cancer, which turned out not to be. But that exposed me to looking at clinical research through the eyes of a patient, which is probably the best of both worlds. I didn't have the condition, but I really got to see. And that's when I saw how misaligned the system is. I don't like the word broken, or there are challenges. There are good people working across the board, but it was just misaligned. And it's at that point that I resolved that I was going to do something different. So who we are pRxEngage. We've developed a platform to better engage communities and patients in understanding what clinical trials are going on. We do this in a way that is relatable, where the information we present is simple to understand and easy to remember. We've designed the platform with communities and individual patients, and not how we see it, but how we all see it together. And most importantly, we've gone to where patients are. We understand, expecting someone to come to us is fine if you're a Facebook, but not necessarily if you're a platform sharing information on clinical trials. We are becoming more and more trusted. We only launched in May of this year, but we've had over 80,000 people come across the platform. And where we're really resonating is in particular with rare disease communities and patients and guardians. And so we've now really come out as a platform that is going to be for and by patients with rare disease. And one of the reasons why we've done this is the data has presented this to us. This is what people are telling us is needed. It's not necessarily available elsewhere, although other platforms do exist. And I'm sure they'll say that they also serve rare disease communities. That's going to be our focus. We're not exclusionary. We are not aligned in such a way that we don't help other populations. In fact, there's over 15,000 trials now live on the platform. So do visit app.pRxEngage.com to have a look. But what we do is something different. We do this work in such a way. Sorry, my printer's going off. We do this work in such a way that medical suitability is only part of the equation. It is clearly the gatekeeper, but more importantly, we look at, does the study fit the person, and rather than the person fitting into the study, it's does the study fit into the person's lifestyle? And that typically leads to less decisional conflict, greater retention. Because if you think about anything that we do, if you have to make compromises to fit into a particular task, whatever it happens to be, you can do this for a period of time. Some people can do it for eternity. But in the majority of cases, we can only do this for a finite period of time, and that's where you see drop-off. We work in such a way that the information is presented in a digestible manner, and this is to reduce cognitive load, and that's what helps with the retention. And then we signpost patients into clinical trials, and we'll connect those patients with the research centers. So we do not hold a database, we do not recruit, but we empower, we educate, and we give patients agency. We can just go to the next slide. So as I said before, trials are hard, but they don't necessarily need to be. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we see, for those that know me, I'm on LinkedIn all the time, so it's quite hard not to. And I do talk a lot, but I keep saying the same thing, and that is, that's on purpose. That's not because I've got nothing else to say. We're still not quite addressing all of the challenges that are out there. Again, if we follow cognitive load theory, we can only do this in bite-sized chunks. That's how we actually affect change. But when we ran a survey at the beginning of this journey, we saw about 80% of the people that we surveyed were interested in clinical trials. And that's actually on the lower end of what has been presented in other surveys of this nature. And we're talking significant numbers of patients. In one of the other surveys by Stuff That Works, they had over 90% of people said they would consider a clinical trial. What we see, however, is an enormous drop-off. And in our case, this was down to about 30% of people actually going on to screen for or participate in a trial. And that gap is in part down to medical suitability, but the majority of it comes down to burden. And, if you're having to push water up a hill, the steeper the hill, the less likely it is that people are going to make that attempt to get to the top. The things that typically come up are time, travel, logistics. For me, one of the other things that comes across quite clearly, and I see this a lot in the work I do within the ethics service here in the UK. I chair one of the national ethics committees, is that there is a lack of clarity in the tangible and less tangible benefits of these trials. We are very quick and we are very good at saying what things are not or what the risks are, but we are not particularly good at highlighting potential benefits. And that's wrong, because to make an informed decision, you should have a very balanced view of both. We're also not particularly good at setting expectation. We piecemeal information like that in, but actually, if we were upfront as to what the relationship is going to be, so a term I use a lot, and it's not mine, I heard it from a more intelligent colleague than me, transactional altruism. If we are clearer in what we do and why we're doing it and what we expect to get from it, then we will have a more level playing field. And that will lead to the pivotal part of why burden shows up, the lack of trust. And for me, that lack of trust is something that is detrimental to the early engagement, and then more so to the retention of people in clinical trials. We are not particularly good at standing up and saying, we got something wrong. There's been plenty of times over the years in clinical trials, whether it's through the opioid crisis or then the trials themselves, where we've not acknowledged our failings. And by not acknowledging them, we are ebbing away at the trust that exists in communities. And this is far more evident in ethnic communities, Black African, African American, East Asian, and so on, where there is already a very low level of trust because of what's happened in the past. And we need to hold our hands up and say, we got it wrong, we acknowledge it, this is what we're doing right. Now, the fix is not simple, but it is achievable. And the primary thing is something I spoke about before. Don't expect people to come to you. You need to go to them and reduce friction wherever that is feasible. But most of all, beyond making that journey understandable, it's include people from a community and the community itself in the design of these trials. Because if you do that, you get that early buy-in, you know what will work, you know what won't, and that's where that commitment comes in. So that's what I would personally look at in terms of how we start to fix the situation. If we can go to the next slide. And so that's really where I think community partnerships matter. And apologies, the slide is very full, lots of icons, lots of pictures, but I've done that on purpose because that's how we flood information into people. We overload people with a ton of information. Do this, do that, look at this picture, listen to this podcast, come on a webinar, whatever it happens to be. And we're not particularly good at communicating in such a way that is clear, straightforward, and aligned with whatever that community is. We almost have a playbook of, well, this is how we dealt with it with this community, and we'll roll this out again against all the others. And every community is different. For some communities, placebo in controlled trials are an issue. For other communities where there is no therapy, anything will do. For communities where there isn't a lot of access to standard of care or enhanced clinician visits, that's what would benefit. So really, when we look at community, it's understanding what does that community need and listen, really listen, not just talk, speak with people. And that is why we're going to get to Caleigh in just a second. We've got to look at what are the potential barriers and looking at how we adjust them. And, if we do that, we unlock not just the buy-in of those that lead the community, but those at grassroots that are actually affecting a lot of the change. Those people who are coming into that community at a point of diagnosis, who are now desperate or scared, anxious, or a combination of these, and looking for some semblance of hope or whatever they need to help bridge them into the next part of their health journey. And a health journey is not always about taking part in a clinical trial. That's one option. But to this point, we've kind of looked at it as someone is diagnosed with a condition, and then we start them on standard of care. And clinical trials are things that are typically thought about when everything else has failed or where there is no option. And actually where we should be is in that original conversation, this is standard of care. These are the potential therapies that you could look at, albeit they are experimental, because that allows a person to make a truly informed decision about their health journey. And if we look at how we do this, we can only do this with community buy-in, and we only get that from trust, and we only get that from working with every community in a logical way, in a calm way, and without this chaos that you see on the screen. So I will stop there. The next slide is just how you get in touch with me and how you can look at the platform, because I'm eager rather that we hear from someone who has lived with a condition her whole life, who I came across in the summer of this year and has had a material impact on the way in which we work and the way in which I think, to the point now that when I'm working on something new, I do think, what would Caleigh think? And not only what would Caleigh think, what would the wider communities think? So, Caleigh, I'll hand over to you because you're going to be far more interesting than me. If you don't mind introducing yourself, Lisbeth, I know I've taken over a bit. It's your job. But
yeah, hi. I'm Caleigh Haber, and I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at birth. I'm now 35 years old, and throughout those 35 years, I've received 2 double lung transplants, and I've learned a lot about healthcare and how to raise my voice as a patient and advocate for myself. And that hasn't come easy for me. It's come through a lot of hard decisions and a lot of sleepless nights. But I'm happy now to be at a stable point in my health where I can raise my voice for others as well and give back to the community. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for everybody who's watching. And I'm excited to hear or to participate in this conversation with you all.
So, Caleigh, I had a few questions, and I know these are things that we've kind of discussed a bit in the past, but I think it would be good for others to hear it. So, when I first met you, and I have to credit a colleague of mine, Tom, for having made me aware of you, you've got a really large community of people online that follow you. I don't know how big your social following is now, but I know it's the tens of thousands, close to 100,000, and I watch your posts, I see what you do, and it's authentic. You're taking people on your health journey with you, but how have you built it? How have you built such a large community, and why did you do it in the first place?
Yeah, so I built Fight to Breathe. If you're on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, you can look that up. And I built it out of survival, actually. So for me, when I was told I needed a double lung transplant, I was 20 years old and I didn't have a lot of support when it came to financials and a family who could give me that. My mom and my brother were both my caretakers. They were extremely involved, but it was really tough on our family. There was an extreme amount of burden on all ends, of appointment burnout to decision-making burnout. And Fight to Breathe came at a point when I was told I needed that double lung transplant, but also I needed to fundraise in order to get it. And that's because I live in the United States, and with insurance, there was going to be a lot of hidden costs associated with having a double lung transplant, including 2 full-time caregivers needing to be available for 3 months and not work and take care of me post-transplant. And so Fight to Breathe started as a fundraiser for me, but it actually turned into much more because I started to blog from the beginning, just sharing what I was going through in the evaluation process, all the way through my transplant, through going into organ rejection to my second transplant, and now building a life every single day and figuring it out as an adult who is 35 years old, but sometimes feels like I'm just at my starting point of independence and growing a successful life with a partner and being a dog mom. But you know, it wasn't easy. What I've gotten out of being a social platform has been connection to my community, because it's not just me sharing my story and other people, you know, coming back to me and saying it's helped them, but it's really given me a lot of motivation and will to push to live on days where I felt like I couldn't continue, but yet my brother and my mom was bedside reading and encouraging, you know, comments to me to keep pushing on. So I'm really grateful for the community that has formed from it.
And so, you know, this community is formed from your need at the time, but a lot of people have that need. What pushed you? Because I went to an amazing meeting up in Manchester, the Beacon for Rare Disease Showcase, and there were a lot of rare disease communities, a lot of grassroots ones there, people who have taken that leap as you've taken, but then a number of people who I could see sitting in the audience not quite sure how to do it. So how do you take that leap and, more importantly, sustain it?
Taking the leap again was a little bit, you know, it wasn't really a choice for me, because I felt that when I was first told I needed a transplant, I didn't want to do it. I felt that being diagnosed with a rare genetic disease, it had progressed to the point where it was meant to go, and that was going to be a shortened lifespan. However, when I looked around me and I saw my family being impacted by, you know, my depression and my just extreme illness of being in the hospital all the time, it gave me that motivation to push, because I didn't want them to be negatively affected by the aftermath of me passing away. And so that's what gave me that motivation to start sharing. But as I started hearing from others, you know, that they had never seen somebody with my disease, they had never talked to somebody with my disease, they didn't know that other people were suffering like they were, I started to understand the impact of my disease on a bigger level than myself. And by sharing, I wanted to show people that they could do it too. I'm not special. You can also do this. You can take that leap. You can start sharing. You know, you should feel empowered to share, because your lived experience is an expertise. It's a skill set that can be shared with others and able to learn how to advocate for themselves as well. And that is how I sustain it. I think it's the drive to help people who maybe don't feel they have a voice or don't feel like they have a community. In rare disease, especially, you know, cystic fibrosis, there's 70,000 people living with it in the United States. But for a lot of people with rare disease, they don't know anybody else with their disease. They haven't even made one single connection with somebody, and they're trying to navigate a diagnosis alone, essentially. And so I want them to feel welcomed into the community as well, because although we're not sharing the same disease, we're most likely sharing the same struggle in different ways, but we can understand each other.
Okay, so you touch on something there. You know, when you said there was an expectation of a shortened lifespan, and as I said, I'm a scientist, studied science my whole life. That was my interest. So for me, I knew what cystic fibrosis was. 25 years ago, the landscape was very different to where we are now in terms of awareness. So if you ask anyone on the street, there's a fair chance they know what cystic fibrosis is, but asked them 25 years ago, the majority of people wouldn't do. And this is the one area where I see really significant changes in research. But even with all of that, when I've seen the images and the videos of the medication that people have to take, I mean, it's unbelievable. And so we've not fixed cystic fibrosis yet, but we are definitely further along. So what impact do you see, other than the obvious, the extended life expectancy and so on, that research has had for your community?
Yeah, great question. I think it's about hope. I think it's about giving people a hope to accomplish whatever it is that they want. When you're told or that you have a shortened life expectancy, a lot of times you don't feel like you can achieve what other people around you can. And so you don't actually go for those goals, at least in my case. I didn't feel like I would get to a point where I could be a doctor and a surgeon like I wanted to be. So why even try? Why even start college if I wasn't going to be able to finish it? And so I think that hope in career, in family, in being able to be reliable for the people you love. And that means showing up for them every day, emotionally and also physically as a support. And you don't just need others to support you, but you can give that back as an equal partner, is really, really big. My community, I see, just has changed so much because of research. And, there's a lot of people who also don't have these medications. So we can't forget about those people. There's about 10% of people living with cystic fibrosis who can't access these medications because they don't help them because of their genetic mutation. So we want to keep pushing for those people as well. And I think having a tight-knit community can push that forward. So we've banded together and raised our voices together.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Now, you said something to me, it must have been a month or 2 months ago now, where we were talking about the importance of showing people with the condition and their guardians what clinical research is going on, even from that early stage. And it's why we at pRxEngage really advocate to have widgets on these platforms that show the ongoing research in real time. You said it's important so that you can track as a patient the development of that drug, so that when it does come onto the market, it's like words effective, it's like welcoming home an old friend, rather than this is something new and I now need to learn about it. So what do you think the industry is doing well? And by industry, this is not to have a go at biopharma. By industry, I mean, what do you think the industry is doing well from a biopharma, a research side perspective, and a community perspective in terms of the interaction, but what could they do better?
Mm-hmm. I think what they could do better is helping patients be more involved from the start rather than just asking for feedback. So that means including us at the very beginning stage and letting us be co-creators in decision making, rather than bringing something that's fully developed to us and asking, do you like it? And also accepting change, right? Being able to adapt, because when you ask a patient their opinion and a patient gives a pain point, for example, we should really, as an industry, take that in and hear it and act on it. What can we do? What can we do differently? And keep open communication, keep it a two-way conversation, and look at patients as peers, because patients do have expertise. They live with, this disease day to day. A lot of times patients are going into rooms educating the professionals because we're living with it and we are so unique. That's another important part, right? Like, we have the same disease, but we may have different complications within that disease. So yeah, I think including us as equal partners and as peers is really important.
Okay. And I'm minded of time. So Lisbeth, I promise my last question. If I wrote a piece a few weeks ago, just talking about where I see things and what my hopes are for 2026. So if you now, as someone who is working within the sector, and you kind of straddle that, working with biopharma, working with community groups, being a community group in yourself, what are your hopes for patient engagement, the community voice, and how to reach out to people about research and how the various groups should interact?
Mhm. Looking ahead at 2026, I really hope that patient engagement, community voice, and research can, like I said before, look at us as co-creators and as peers and give us fair support, meaning give us compensation and give us support in a way that's like mentorship, possibly helping us and guide us into the spaces where we're meant to be, putting us in the room that is making those decisions and helping the patient voice guide policy, guide ethics, and have a place in the conversation. And I think looking at us in a non-transactional way is also really important, because it's a partnership, and partnership isn't about, I take something from you, but I don't give something back. It's about both parties helping each other, or all parties helping each other. And also understanding that our health is going to change all the time, and being adaptable to that is really important too, because we have a lot of stress of health, and sometimes overnight we can get an infection and have to go to the hospital. And so being adaptable to that and understanding to our situation is important.
Well, Caleigh, thank you. And Lisbeth, this conversation is the type of conversation we have all day at pRxEngage, and but we couldn't do the work we do without people like Caleigh, without people like yourself, and John as well. We will have a conversation, if you don't mind. I'm putting you on the spot here down the line. But I think what's key is when we talk about community and people talk about engagement, engagement is a conversation, and that conversation leads to something. There must be actionable outcomes for all parties, but those actionable outcomes don't have to be tangible at the minute we finish. That makes it transactional. As Caleigh said, it's a partnership. We started out in a transactional manner in how we started working, and it's now led to, well, one of the first thoughts I have when I'm thinking of something new is, I wonder what Caleigh would think. And that has happened because the relationship and the dynamic has changed into a partnership, rather than this is what I'm going to do, let me just get the green light from a patient so I can say, patients accept this. Anyway, thank you for giving us the chance to speak.
Oh, I know it's me. Thank you so much, Keith, for your presentation about who you are. But Caitlin, I will just definitely say thank you for sharing your history. You're not alone. We have heard it a lot before, but I wanted to ask if there is any question. And John, I'm picking you because I wanted to know if you have any questions. I definitely have a couple of questions for you. I actually think that the way that you're scoping, Keith, your organization is quite good, because every time you have the stamp of a patient approval, and I think that's the way forward. So yeah, thank you for that. And John, do you have anything to ask or anything to say? You're welcome.
No, actually, I know we're short on time, so I'll be really brief. And first of all, thank you for the invite, Lisbeth. I'm trying to remember where we met. Did we meet in Amsterdam at the ICHOM conference?
Yes,
yeah, that's
we
right.
did.
That's right. So nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I'm listening to Caleigh. Caleigh, I'm a fan. I'm impressed. I'm supportive. I'm an advocate of yours. I'm one of the silent majority in the background, and I wish I was as impactful as you, but I do recognize and appreciate the good work that you're doing. And Keith, I like the overview. I'm a heart patient myself, and I've had by and large, a very good journey. So there are some of us actually do have good journeys, but all of us who have a major issue, in my case, a heart issue, we go through and we have some takeaways and some recognitions. I'm in overtime. I'm in extra innings. 13 years ago, I heard that I had a 50-50 chance of living for 2 years. So I'm an extra inning, and I'm grateful. I'm humble and I'm grateful. Those are the two learnings that stuck with me. So I do an awful lot of, I'm retired, and I do an awful lot of volunteer and support and work and a lot of mentorships. But I'm also a global patient advocate. And as you know, Lisbeth, I've done some work with ICHOM. I'm a founding board member of Heart Valve Voice Canada, and I've done work with Global Heart Hub and lots of local work as well. One of the things that I'm mindful of as a patient is systematic obstacles that patients face. Now, I'm using that term when I know sometimes it is a friction point for non-patients to hear that, because that implies that there's something there that's out of their control. I have found, at least in my journey, that all of the partners that interact along the patient journey are highly caring and capable professional people. They're all good people. So when you're addressing a group of good people and you say the problems faced by patients along their journey is systematic obstacles, they recoil a bit. So I'm careful, I'm using that language. However, I use that language because we patients acknowledge and see incremental change, but many of us don't have the luxury, and we're looking for step change. So we're way better. I mean, as a society, way better than we've been, but we're not as good as we're going to be. So we're anxious. Let's get as good as we're going to be. Let's think a little outside the box. Let's address some of the systematic obstacles, which would be anything from I'm in Canada, and I'm lucky I'm access to a big city, but people in the far north, geographic obstacles. There could be, Caleigh mentioned in the States, sometimes there's financial obstacles. And there could be any type of systematic obstacles that patients face. So we need to first acknowledge they exist. And I'm finding that there's a fair bit of pushback on acknowledging some of the obstacles. Here in Canada, we put in unnecessary provincial barriers. So, Caleigh, you would call them state barriers, but we have barriers for one province, and each province has its own healthcare system. In the UK, Keith, you have one. You have the NHS. You have a larger population than we do. You have one health system. We have 15 in Canada, in a smaller. So unnecessary, systematic obstacles. So part of my mission is to walk in the room and turn the light on to some of the obstacles that's faced by patients along their journey. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for inviting me to join the team. I have no other questions. However, I'm learning a lot. And Keith, I really got a lot of your overview. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And Lisbeth, if I can just two things. I agree with you, John. This is not, I always say, don't point fingers because you bring up people's barriers. I'm yet to come across anyone working in the community sector, within a research site, within a biopharma company who does so and is evil. To be quite, no. It doesn't exist. We all do this for the right reasons. I think what happens is we kind of lose our why along the way. I lost my why, and it's not like I'm a saint and I've always had it. I lost my why for a while. I found it again. That's why I love what I do. And I think it's about helping each other just remember why we're here. So, John, you've just given me something that I hadn't thought about it in context, and you kind of just flipped through it in your sentence. But patients are looking for step change, whereas what we're seeing is incremental. And I think other than the 12 LinkedIn posts that are going through my head right now about what we could say there, I think the thing we should be looking at there is, how do we now align communities in such a way that step change happens once in a blue moon? That's your moonshot. It's not common for that to happen. And how do we align community groups that it is more incremental, and we don't have to accept it as it won't get better than that. We always shoot for the moon, but understand sometimes we fall short. But equally then bring the biopharm and the research community into this in such a way that, guys, we are expect you to shoot for the moon, but we understand that this is incremental. So I think there's another whole conversation to be had here at another point. So thank you for making me think slightly differently.
Yeah. But lastly, and I know we don't have time to unpack this, but the other large area we as a community, as a group, need to focus on is how we patients can become more effective partners in their journey ourselves. So we carry a responsibility to being not only just engaged, but be informed and be articulate.
Yeah, you're so right, John. Caitlin. Oh, you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Going off of what John just said, that was the perfect segue to what I was thinking is, being an effective partnership is about that knowledge. And I think for a patient, the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to constantly educate ourselves about everything that there is to know about our own disease. And so I really do want to encourage people to use pRxEngage or any other platform as a tool to put into your toolbox, and look at clinical trials as a way that you can, not look for it as the end answer, as Keith was saying, after you've run out of options, but really stay in the know so that when something pops up, you can present it to your doctors, because having those informed conversations when you speak to your doctors really does cause the effect of a collaborative conversation, versus maybe spinning something off that you're not that educated and they will just say no, and there's no knowledge to open up the conversation some more. So look at all of your tools, and I really encourage everybody to keep educating yourself. And I'm really happy that you all invited me to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you're completely right. One of the elements that we are talking about here is how we as an organization can actually help ourselves in our diagnosis area. And I think that's a whole lot of questions, because I think that will be something that is both legal door requirement later on in the future, actually, but also I think that it's something that we as a patient organization should really be prepared for. And this is why PiCC United is trying to lower the bar and trying to help small organizations to really have the backpack on to be engaged from the very early start. And I really love when you said that we need to be a part of something from the very early start. That is very, very important for us. So thank you, Caleigh, for really highlighting this. I really think that this is something that we could have a whole day of discussion on. We only have this hour, and I think that in spite of time, maybe if we have some last keynotes to go away from, would be more than appreciated if you have that, both Keith and Caleigh.
Okay, I wasn't planning on that, but something I saw, so I'm looking it up on my phone. I saw this on the tube the other day, and actually became it's become the topic of the newsletter I was just writing for that we put out on LinkedIn. And it's a saying that just is: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely your own. And I think that absolutely sums up where I would like to see 2026 go. because there's a ton of really good stuff going on out there, and there's a lot of noise as well, and it's about wading through that. So one of the things that I'm very focused on is what's working well. Let's not try and fix it. What's not working particularly well, let's tweak it. John, to the point, these will be incremental changes, although we look to make step changes. I'm an impatient person, so our technical team, I tell them, oh, it'd be great if we could do this. And they said, well, we've got to do this and plan like a good engineering team should do. And I look thoroughly disappointed because this has not happened in front of my eyes, although our CTO and our head of product, Charlie and Ethan, are exceptionally good. I think we need to understand that things are going to take time. And I think 2025, we've laid the groundwork, even 24, but 25 in particular, laid the groundwork for this shift. And 26 is where we need to now sustain that. So that really by setting a realistic goal of by 2030, we're in a completely different place. And we're not necessarily having to have conversations like how does community better interact with biopharma and research sites and so on. It should just be something we do.
Thank you. Caitlin?
And to go off of that, Keith, I think you're right. We did set a lot of groundwork for in 2025, and to push forward towards that goal that you spoke of on 2030. From the patient perspective, I think creating an environment where patients feel seen, heard, and supported is really important. I know all of us are working towards that now. And from the patient, I just want to share that building that relationship from the very start is really important. Sharing a connection with patients so they don't feel like you're just, you know, in a recruitment or trying to gain something from them, but it's a genuine relationship is great. Like I said, keeping that two-way conversation open so that patients can respond and shape direction is really important. And showing up year round, not just when it's convenient, because a lot of us with disease, sometimes we think, you know, oh, something's in the market right now or something's on the news. And so we're going to be focused on for a month or for a week or for a year. But we really want that, not just year round, I guess I should say lifetime support and consistency from the industry, and just including as many diverse voices as we can to shape those decisions are important. So thank you so much. And I, again, really, really love this conversation.
Thank you, both of you, for participating today.